YouTube vinyl community, Beach Boys fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the 1972 album for the Beach Boys, Carl and the Passions, So Tough. It's a cool car. It's a nice looking car there, guys. So, this is an album put out during the, I guess you could say, peak of the early 70s Beach Boys era where, now Ricky and Blondie are in the band. Their live shows are becoming a whole different animal. Things were really changing for them, and this album was kind of stuck in the middle of all that before you got to Holland, where things were really gelled and smoothed out, and kind of got the ball rolling a little bit easier at that point. But this album in particular, I think, is extremely strong, even though it's kind of quirky and a little left field at times. I think it's a fantastic listen and shows a band trying to figure out something new and completely change course and can change gears and see how they work in that element. There's nothing more interesting than seeing a band try to figure something else out. They're not resting on their laurels, they're not resting on the hits, they're not resting on ideas of the past. It's a completely forward-thinking album with new band members, new blood, fresh ideas, and that's kind of how they went into it. So, flashback, back to about 1969. Carl's in London. He sees a band called The Flame, and he really likes them. He's digging them. And a couple of guys in there he befriends, and then over the next couple of years they keep in touch, and then all of a sudden these two guys are hanging out with the Beach Boys more and playing on stage with them. So Blondie Chaplin on guitar, Ricky Furtado on drums. It worked out perfectly timing-wise because Dennis had destroyed his hand in an accident, so he couldn't play drums for a super long time. So he was basically on stage either singing or doing some piano work. And I think Mike Kowalski may have filled in for a little bit on drums. But basically, they reconnected with Blondie and Ricky, and then asked them to come hang out, and then very slowly, eventually asked them to join the group as actual Beach Boys, which was great because Ricky is a fantastic drummer, and Blondie is an absolutely amazing singer-songwriter. I mean, Ricky wrote songs too, but Blondie's voice is just unfreaking believable. So, and everyone was stoked about it. It was partly Jack's idea, Jack Riley, their manager at the time, partly Jack's idea, but mostly on Carl. He felt like, you know what, this is what we need. He's kind of the de facto leader at this point after Brian kind of said, I'm going to bed. Carl took over, basically, and was really close with Jack Riley, and so was Brian, but, they had this vision of where the band could go, and they were really evolving. The Sunflower album was a humongously amazing piece of work with a ton of Brian. Brian is all over that album. The Surf's Up album was a way different step in a whole different direction, much more what they call roots rock. And so in keeping with that tradition, this is what happened. So in December of 71, the guys got together and they basically made Marcella, which was originally called One Arm Over Your Shoulder, One Arm Over My Shoulder. They basically made this song, and they kind of handled it as a single, as an option for a single. They felt it was pretty good. And in that time, they were also feeling kind of weary about Warner Brothers, as they had been, and as Warner's had been the whole time too. So they felt kind of weird about that. And because of that, they had the idea, maybe we should shop labels again and see what we can come up with. Apple Records, the Beatles' Apple Records, was showing interest in the Beach Boys. Could you imagine if the Beach Boys signed to Apple? How crazy that would have been? Holy crap. So Apple was totally interested. But in typical Beach Boys fashion, that just fell by the wayside. And they said, nah, we'll stay with Warner's. Who cares? Sod it. Stay with these guys. And in this time, they officially announced that Blondie and Ricky were in the band at a press conference. And they mentioned a whole bunch of other crazy stuff. Carl was like, oh yeah, we're going to finish Smile. Yeah, that's going to come out. I was going through some tapes with the old Master Painter recently. It got taken out with the garbage, tried to put them all back together again, but now we got safety copies. He was going into all this detail about Smile, and a lot of the journalists were like, holy crap, really? This might happen? Obviously it didn't, but they started playing Wonderful during their shows at this point, which blows my mind. Very cool. But so they did Marcella, and they did a handful of other songs in December of 71. They kind of left it, and they were on tour for a long time, really a lot of the time in the Netherlands, and they fell in love with this place, and they were like, you know what, we gotta do something out here. We gotta make an album out here. And Jack was like, yeah, let's do it. And so he started to get the preliminary details of how to get the guys over there, figuring out that like recording would be impossible at an EMI studio because they were booked forever. Finding houses during a houses crisis or a houses shortage and crisis was going to be tough. So this album could have been done in the Netherlands, but instead, between all that stuff having to get figured out, between building the mixing desk and console and everything else, and then shipping it and bringing it to Holland, that became the Holland album much later on in '72. So, to think what could have been with this thing, but Brian had written Funky Pretty early on in the year, so Funky Pretty could have ended up on this thing. So yeah, December 4th of 1971, they started off with All This Is That. They did You Need a Massive Help to Stand Alone, which was originally called Beatrice from Baltimore, and Here She Comes and He Comes Down. And then they kind of left it because, like I said, they were out touring and doing a whole bunch of stuff. In April of that year, of 72, they settled on the name, which was the name of the band that like Brian and Mike had for a couple seconds in the early days in high school. And Warner's kind of settled on a May 15th date of putting this thing out. So they were on a time crunch. And because of that, most of the album had been done in Brian's studio and also in Santa Monica, on 5th Street in Santa Monica. They had built like a new studio converted out of an old movie theater. So a lot of the album was there, but then a lot of it was split up between like Village Recorders, Sunset, and I think, was it Western? That's not right. Yeah, it was just Sunset Village and Brian's Home Studio, so those are the three. But because of that, there are moments where you can tell like they may have done this without some of the guys. Like there's a couple of songs where there's moments where you're like, is anybody else on this thing besides Ricky and Blondie? Like it sounds kind of sparse. So yeah, they were doing that. Bruce was kind of in and out of the sessions. Brian was in and out of the sessions. He does sing back up on a couple of songs on, like Marcella, You Need to Mess Up to Stand Alone, and he helped produce a couple of the tracks too. But Bruce was in and out of this thing. He wasn't feeling what was going on at the time with the band, and rumors are out that he either was fired for not agreeing with what was happening, or he quit because he was not agreeing with what was happening at the time, and wanted to try his own thing and do his own thing and see what would happen. So on April 10th of 1972, he left. So basically, the whole album had been made, but he says the only thing he's on is on Marcella as a background vocalist. He might be on some other stuff, who knows, but he was kind of in and out at this point between the recording studio stuff. So he left, the album came out, and it hit number 50 in the charts, which isn't terrible. It's really not too bad to be, in the top 50. It's obviously not the heyday of what they had been doing, and Surf's Up charted much better than this one did. But it hit number 25 in the UK. Really good showing over there. The Marcella single did come out, hit number 110. So really not bad. The album itself is funny because it says produced by all of the guys. It says Brian, Blondie, Ricky, Dennis, you got it. And then, Carl. And at the end it says, especially by Carl. So I love that the album was produced by all of them, but mostly Carl. When this thing was originally released, it was also released as a twofer with Pet Sounds. Because they had just settled all the agreements with Capitol Records for unpaid royalties and for a whole bunch of other crap. And then got rights to the last 5 of their Capitol albums. So everything Pet Sounds and up. So what they did was they were like, hey, let's reissue Pet Sounds. So they slapped it on the back. So you get a 2-album set. In other countries, it was a single album set of just Carl and the Passions, but there's rumors that there were index numbers and matrix numbers and all kinds of stuff for a single issue of this album in the States. It never happened. But unfortunately, my copy is kind of falling apart. The records are in good shape and the jacket's kind of beat. But, so yeah, I love this inner shop. All the guys, obviously no Bruce, but yeah, Carl and the Passions, Pet Sounds. So let's do it, guys. This album opens up with You Need a Massive Help to Stand Alone, produced by Brian and Carl. Brian sings harmony on this one. The original lyrics, like I said, were originally by Brian. Jack thought they were okay, and he rewrote the lyrics, and it turned out to be a real cool stomper of a song. I mean, Carl's rocking vocal on this thing is just straight up amazing. Ricky's really smooth drumming with his really cool fills throughout this whole track. The vocals shimmer throughout the whole thing. The whole background vocals thing that they do is just amazing. The guys really know how to rock. And this track is particularly interesting because they incorporate a lot of instruments they haven't really played with too much, like banjo. and a mix of the banjo and tambourines, or just tambourines and vocals. So they gotta go places that they hadn't been before, which is really fun to listen to them do that. I love the vocal interplay throughout this song with the one arm over my shoulder. Oh, nope, that's Marcella. She don't know line, that whole stuff. The blending so seamlessly into each other and all those vocals and all those different harmonies. And then the music coming in and out again. Very, very cool track. It did not do anything as a single, but very, very cool song. Carl just nails it. It's easily one of his best vocals of the early 70s. It's a really far out listening kind of track. I love the end. I love all that weaving together. And then you jump into Beach Boys Mach 2 or 3 or whatever you want to call it. Here She Comes. This is a totally different feel for the Beach Boys. Really digging that rubbery bass line that goes through this whole thing. Really, really clean, tight production on this thing. Blondie's amazing lead vocal. The whole like "Can you dig me" line, it's so cool. Cool bouncy piano work. The powerful organ swells that come up through this thing. Again, slick drumming from Ricky. It's vocally pretty sparse. It's mostly just like a lead song by Blondie with a couple of moments of the Beach Boys filling in, which kind of just makes it a straight up rock song. It doesn't even sound like the Beach Boys at that point, but I like it a lot. Very cool. That whole minimal group vibe is a different approach for them, and it really works. This track in particular sounds like something Fleetwood Mac would have done 3 or 4 years later with Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham when they joined. It's got that Fleetwood Mac feel, like they would have done something like that at that point. Fleetwood Mac, not the original blues band part, but I like the use of empty space. I like the pacing of the song, the timing, the rhythms, and the George Harrison-esque guitar solo was really cool. Totally sounds like George Harrison, hands down. And then the fade out to the jam is really cool. He Comes Down is produced by Al and Carl, and this track is very interesting because it's straight up gospel. It's the Beach Boys doing gospel. It's very cool to hear them try this. I like Mike's vocal, his lead vocal throughout the verses, because it starts off kind of dry, and then as it gets closer to the verses, they add a ton of echo, like he's falling down a well, and then it just like snaps into the chorus, and it's completely dry again with no echo at all. Very cool effect. But the whole song is just like, exuberant and joyously executed. It's a really happy sounding, joyous song. It sounds like you're going to church because there's big church organs throughout this thing. Then there's moments in the bridge where it's like really meditative or kind of chill, then it jumps back into it again. But very, very fun to listen to them just kind of have like a really good time in the studio. And Blondie's vocal fills that happen throughout are just fantastic. And then you get Marcella, which is just an absolute smash, and that was the song that they picked up for a single, which, like I said, hit 110. Not the greatest showing, but it's still a really good song. But Carl rips through this vocal again, and this sounds more like a Beach Boys song. The background vocals are there. The interweaving vocal lines again, one arm over my shoulder, all that stuff. It's just a rocking, fun, upbeat song that doesn't let up at all. It's a total classic. It's easily the highlight of the album, for sure, if you're going for like a more of a single vibe. Yeah, that's totally it. But I love the slide guitar. I love the zither that's on this thing. There's a weird one for you. And the chorus build up with Mike starting to build up on his own, and the other guys join in. More instruments join in. Very, very fun track. Side 2 starts off with "Hold On Dear Brother," produced by Ricky. And this is totally, again, way out of left field. This sounds like an Eagles song. It sounds like something really early country-inspired Eagles would have done. It's got that soulful vibe that carries over from "Here She Comes" and "He Come Down," so that's there still. But the acoustic guitars, the really wonderful lead vocal from Blondie, it's definitely a more straightforward song, but there are tiny little elements that are thrown in, just enough of a curveball to keep it interesting, and with a couple of hooks to really keep it in your head. But again, the slide guitar is great, the country-tinged feeling is nice, the bouncy bridge section is a lot of fun to listen to, but again, continues in that whole other New World Beach Boys vibe. Then you get Dennis. Dennis shows up for a couple of songs here. Make It Good. So having not had any songs on Surf's Up and kind of gotten, ripped off out of that one, he pops up with 2 absolute smash songs that he wrote with Daryl Dragon that was intended for an album with him. Never happened. Eventually he'd do Pacific Ocean Blue, but this song, Make It Good, is extremely powerful. He steals the show with his intensity, his pain-filled vocals, his uh, overwhelmingly loving delivery. The way he expresses himself is heavy, man. It's just heavy. The heavy brass, the string section that's like so tension-filled. Dennis is building and building and building, and then it eventually just stops and kind of fades away, which leads really, really nicely into All This Is That, which is an absolutely brilliant track. Leads from Carl, Al, and Mike throughout this thing, the pure serenity of the vocals, the chillness, the meditative vibe, Mike's effortlessly smooth delivery, Carl's powerful soul that is captured onto that vocal take. That makes all the difference to me when he sings that. Like, holy crap, guys! Like, it's so good. The whole song itself is totally hypnotic. That slightly shuffling rhythm underneath it, the tinkling piano keys, it's just dripping in a meditative spirit. There's just a magic throughout this song that carries it the whole time. And if you close your eyes and just chill out to this song, it takes you places. Undeniable song that's so cool, and it's absolutely beautiful. Great track. Produced by Alan Carl. And then the last song on the album, Cuddle Up, produced by Dennis. Holy moly, man. I mean, it's for a closer, wow. It's a sweeping epic meant to just, like, tear at your heart with all that intense devotion and vulnerability that was so much a part of his voice and his delivery. The piano is so timid, but also stunning and sad and painful. And it's yearning for intimacy just as much as Dennis's voice is doing the same thing with the lyrics. His voice is raw, it's delicate, and it's just unreal with that delivery. It's so constantly wonderful. And it's bordering on, like, sometimes lost and sometimes confident, which may have been, like, his personality. Because he was always, like, searching for something. From everything I've read or movies I've watched about him, or documentaries. The dynamic shifts in this track are also unbelievable too. There's really, really quiet moments and it swells up again, but it's just an absolutely beautiful arrangement that makes for a truly powerful closer for sure. But yeah, what a soulful guy. Totally soulful guy. But this album, while it is kind of all over the place, makes for a really interesting listen, and I kind of like that. When the two guys joined, when Blondie and Ricky joined, Carl said that these new guys are going to have just as much say as anybody else in this band, and they're going to be able to express themselves just as much as the other guys. And he was true to his word. So when you get songs like Hold On to Your Brother or Here She Comes, I mean, you get like a whole different vibe to the group. And it makes it exciting because all of a sudden you have like that familiarity of the Beach Boys, but mixed with a whole new thing. And for a group that was really trying to make it on their own, basically without Brian, doing way longer shows, avoiding the 45-minute greatest hits set, and going out there and playing a whole bunch of just random obscure choices. Like they started to break out Let the Wind Blow. Dennis would start doing a couple of songs that he wrote like that day. So you never knew what to expect. They even opened some shows with Good Vibrations sometimes. So like they were changing their whole thing, and to capture that moment, that transformative moment, I think it's a fascinating document of the era of a band who is so humongously a part of the DNA of America, to show them going through a whole big change, and to see where they wound up, which eventually was Holland. But yeah, this album, for as disjointed as it is, it's absolutely an amazing listen because it's so many different parts of so many different guys combined as the Beach Boys. And I think calling it Carl and the Passions So Tough is a very interesting name. Not only is it a throwback to their older group name from when they were in high school, but there were some tensions in the band already at this point. Some of the guys were already showing up in different limos, coming on different sides of the stage. Like, there were little cliques throughout this group, even as early as the early 70s. So maybe things were kind of tough. And they wanted to start over again. And what better way to do that than think about some other names you had with earlier bands you were in? Oh, Carl and the Passions. You know, yeah, we had that name once. Let's try it again for a new album. What the heck? It's a fresh start. It's kind of like a new band. Let's do it. Yeah, so absolutely fascinating album. I'd have to give this thing an 8 or 9 out of 10, which is probably going to blow some people's minds, but I think it's a great album. I really, really do. And obviously, Pet Sounds, but we're going to talk about that someday. Not now. Not for a long time. A really long time. But yeah, Carl and the Passions, I'm giving this thing an 8 out of 10. Fantastic album, showing a band at a completely changing of the guard era to see what they can do with some new guys and a new feel, a new direction, and a manager that cared about them and wanted them to try new things, and you had to develop a new audience and kind of start over again as a rock band in the early 70s. So that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Beach Boys, Carl and the Passions. So tough. I'm all choked up about it, you guys. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video, if I stop choking by then. Goodbye.